The next thing I see is the most glorious thing I've seen in my life. What was it? He said, 9 foot tall, wings 15 feet high, is the Archangel Michael. And he's got his sword out. And as you're kneeling, he's touching you with the tip on your head.
Welcome to Cajun Miracles, and we're back with Lou Saia to continue his testimony. Welcome back, Lou.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back.
So we left off last time with an exciting conclusion, and I can't wait to hear more.
Well, I think where we left off was where I had the apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary at a time that I was of the lowest point in my life at that time. And after it occurred, the feeling is just undescribable. My wife had come home from church, and she screamed, "What happened to you?" Right. Well, that night, I couldn't do anything but keep praying and praying and pray. And I wasn't a guy that was praying a lot back then. I prayed at church, at a funeral, at my grandmother's house. But that night, I just kept thinking of the experience, as everyone would. And I just kept praying and praying. Couldn't sleep. And one thing I decided was, I don't care about that joint venture with Northrop Grumman. I don't care about money. They can have it. Let them have it if they want it so bad. It was just amazing. So I went through the night barely sleeping, praying probably a few rosaries, just thinking. Next morning, I'm on my way to work. And I just, the sky looked bluer, the grass looked green. I was just still so happy. And I loved everybody. It was like the day before I was having violent thoughts. I never had another violent thought. I felt love. And, I mean, it was ridiculous. I pull up at a red light. There's a complete stranger next to me. He happens to look my way. I wave at him. And I tell him, "I love you, brother." I mean, I get to work, and I loved everybody at work. You know, prior, this guy might have a sloppy office, that'd be a criticism. Or this person might not have proper hygiene. You know, I think, maybe I should tell him, go take a bath. Not no more. I just loved everybody. Didn't see anything but good in them. And I came to find out later the employees huddled up amongst themselves after about a half a day with me. And they were discussing, what kind of happy drug is he on? I mean, what is he doing? He's different. Mm-hmm. Well, I had attorneys at that time. My money hadn't completely run out, but it was close. And within a few days, my attorneys called and said, "Look, you're behind a bill." I said, "Give me time." They said, "No, if you can't pay us, we're not going to be able to represent you." I said, "Well, who cares? I mean, I don't really care about this fight anymore." Go home that day, which is like the day after it occurred. And I start praying because I just wanted to pray. And all of a sudden, the fragrance that I smelled and tasted when Mary appeared to me came back as I'm praying. I'm sitting on a sofa. And all of a sudden, my whole body begins to start tingling. Never had it happen, something like that happened to me. Like no corporal feelings whatsoever. It was like, it'd be like as if you were on some kind of heavy opioid or something, just no feelings in your body at all. And it scared me. I get up. My wife was in the house with me. I was on the sofa praying. And I get up and I run to the front door and make sure the doors are locked. My wife says, "What you doing?" I said, "I'm getting funny feelings and I'm smelling the same fragrance of when Mary appeared to me yesterday." And so my wife says, "What you doing, trying to lock her out the house?" I said, I thought to myself, no, she can go through walls. So I had what I came to find out from Catholic priests. I came to find out what I was experiencing is called a locution. Your locution is a spiritual movement within the interior, within your soul. And it comes from the Latin word locomote, like movement. Well, I had the first powerful locution, but it was a message, and I knew who it was from. It was Mary, my mother. And, it was like funny because it wasn't long discussions or long messages. She could give me one word. It wasn't audible. This time it was inside. The word was persevere. And I knew what it meant because I'd have this tremendous understanding. What she meant was, my son loves justice. Not through violence, but he loves justice. I knew it meant not to let him off the hook, but to go to court. So I'm thinking to myself, but Mary, how can I go to court because I have no more money? My attorneys told me earlier that they can't represent me if I don't pay them. These locutions occurred in the beginning multiple times a day. But it would only happen if I went to a quiet place and submerged myself in prayer. Well, that week, I get a phone call. 2 attorneys from New Orleans, Tulane grads. We want to meet you. About what? They said, well, we heard about your case with the other law firm that's about to drop me. I said, sure, come on over. They come to our home, meet with my wife and I, spend hours, 2-3 hours, explaining the case, explaining the technology, the patents, and the state of the joint venture. And at the end, they say, we like this case. We'll take it on a contingency. The only thing we'd expect you to do is to pay our airfare, because we know jurisdiction for this joint venture, because we reviewed it, is in New York City. But you have to pay our way up there, pay our expenses, hotel, board, room and board, and take the case. Well, I was so happy. I said, you two guys are Jewish, right? They said, yeah, we are. I said, I know who sent you. The Nazarene sent you. And they laughed. Well, now I got attorneys. But I'm still wondering, how am I going to afford expensive hotels, expensive airfare, expensive food in New York City for all these people? Getting beautiful messages from Mary daily at this point. Well, I didn't remember, but I owned a little trucking company, and I'd been bleeding it to take the money from it to support the joint venture dispute, to support my litigation. Well, I had invited a guy from Volvo Truck out of North Carolina to come. I wanted to buy, it would have been around 50 trucks. But I wanted to borrow more than what the trucks were worth because I needed some cash to continue litigation, to seek justice. So I talk him into giving me a great big discount so that of the $5 million, $3 million go to paying for trucks, $2 million goes in my pocket. Well, he looks at the financials. He said, Lou, your financials have changed for the worse. And I explained the litigation. Mm-hmm. I explained everything. I even explained the Blessed Virgin. I said, are you Catholic? He said, no, I'm Protestant. I said, I got to tell you the story anyway. I got to tell you, when this happened to me, I couldn't contain myself. I don't care who it was, strangers, Catholics, non-Catholics, Jewish, atheists. I had to tell everybody. I said, well, when's your flight leave? He says, I got a few hours before I got to leave New Orleans. I said, look, I've been taking money out of the trucking company to fund litigation. Let me tell you about it. I told him about the dispute with my partner, Northrop Grumman. I told him about my lack of funds, how I was taking money from the trucking company to pay attorneys. But in particular, I was just most excited about telling him about Mary and Jesus and the miracles I experienced. When I'm finished, he's Protestant. His eyes were bigger than mine. He says, I believe every word you just told me, and I think you're going to win. He said, I can sign up to $5 million. And he says, I'm going to do it. Another miracle.
So this guy lent you the $5 million?
Lent the $5 million.
$5 million, wow.
When he shouldn't have, because the financials didn't look good.
Didn't justify it.
So now I got attorneys and I got money and I can seek justice without violence, the way Mary had told me, had explained to me in the first locution. Oh, man, it was something. So I'm praying every day. I'm going to Mass every day. I'm praying multiple rosaries every day. My whole life has changed. In that year, I prayed more from then on to the end of the year than I prayed my whole life. Well, these big corporations are smart. Like I told you, they had 300 to 400 in-house attorneys. So they decide what they're going to do is they say, we got to go to Delaware because they intentionally deadlocked the board. I had half the company, they had half, and we each had 2 people on the board. I was chairman, but we each had 2 votes. Intentional deadlock. And then their lawyers wrote the joint venture in Delaware law. It's a Delaware joint venture. And they know, the attorneys know, in Delaware, if the board's deadlocked, it's common for the judge to say, y'all can't get along. I'm going to dissolve the company and auction the assets, my patents, for instance. So I take some of the money and hire Delaware attorneys that I didn't think I'd need, but all of a sudden, this is their new way of wrestling control of the company away from me. Very expensive. We start getting ready for Delaware. Their idea, the judge dissolves the company. My patents will be on auction because the joint venture owns them now. And Northrop Grumman happens to own plenty subsidiary companies, independent of this joint venture. And they'll have one of those subsidiaries come to the auction and outbid me for my patents because they've broke me and they know it. Pretty clever way to steal. You know, I had grown up around the Italian wise guys, many of which carried guns. You know what scares me more? A Harvard, a Yale guy that becomes an attorney and he's got a computer and a pen. That's scary. Can hurt you more than a gun. So, I got this attorney, Ray DiCamillo. We're getting ready to go to a hearing in Delaware where the judge may force the dissolution of the joint venture and auction the patents. He calls me, he says, Lou, I got bad news. The judge called both sides into his chambers. He said he read the briefs we submitted for the hearing, and that since neither side can get along and the board is deadlocked, he said he's going to dissolve the company, auction the assets. He said, really, Lou, don't waste any more money on us. It's just we know what he's going to rule. I said, okay, Ray. Figured that's it. Well, I'm praying again. And I'm praying. I said, Mary, I thought your son loved justice. And I'm praying my rosaries and this and that. And I have a locution. The smell, the tingling feeling, no corporal feeling. The message I get, go to Delaware. My son loves justice. I come out of the locution, you know, because it's like going somewhere else, and, you know, you got to come out of it. My wife says, you all right? I said, yeah, I had a powerful locution. We're going to Delaware. She said, but the attorney said don't come. It's a waste of money and time. I said, who are you going to listen to, the attorney or the mother of God? Ray, I call Ray, the attorney. I said, Ray, you're Italian, you're Catholic. I said, I didn't tell you this because I thought you might think I'm crazy, but, and, you know, I tell a lot of people, almost everybody I can, but I didn't bring it into this business situation, litigation. But I got to tell you now. Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to me a month and a half ago, and I've been getting locutions. And she told me that I should go to Delaware and that her son loves justice. He's like, okay, Lou, okay. I said, You believe me? He said, oh, yeah, Lou, I believe you. He says, bring the money to pay me, though. You need to pay me when you come. Okay, Ray. We get to Delaware a couple of weeks later. May 6th. It was May 6th, 1996. And we were in Rodney Square, which is like New York City. Skyscrapers, crowded sidewalks, and there's this old Chancery Courthouse. Oh, tall ceilings, high windows. And we walk in, and my wife's there, and I'm holding her hand, and I'm praying. Next thing you know, my opponent shows up. Oh, my goodness. It's like an entourage. 15 people, maybe 20. And I can overhear them. They flew in on the private jets, of course.
This is all Northrop Grumman people.
Oh, yeah, and they're attorneys, and they have a whole squadron of attorneys. And they're Northrop Grumman people. You know, Grumman's got its own airport on Long Island, Islip, Long Island. And I can overhear them. They plan on having a party after they win, after the judge rules on dissolving the joint venture and auctioning away the patents. And they're talking about they got great, food being lined up and hors d'oeuvres and cocktails. And I think I even heard them say, music. And I'm thinking, like Ray DiCamillo told me, it's a done deal. Lost my faith. Andy, that's one of their attorneys, their lead attorney on the other side. I said, Andy, y'all offered me $2 million when y'all wanted to buy me out on the West Coast after we met with the trucker that wanted to place a $50 million order. I said, Andy, I'll take that $2 million. He looks at me and he smiles and he says, oh, no, Mr. Saia, it's too late now. They were certain they were going to win and what the judge was going to do. Well, the judge walks in. I grab my wife by the hand again and I start praying. And I got to tell you what I was praying. I really call it pleading, begging, maybe. I was saying, Mary, please ask your son, Jesus, to touch the judge on his head and let him know they're using his court to steal innocent people's patents and life's work. Mary, please ask your son to touch. Over and over, I'm begging, please ask your son to touch that judge on the head and let him know he's using the court. They're using the court to steal innocent people's patents. Well, it starts. My attorney starts speaking. And the judge looks at his watch. He says, wait a minute. I told y'all I'd read the briefs. We're not going to have a long oral argument because my wife and I have an appointment at the country club. And I've read the briefs thoroughly, and I know how I'm going to rule. I think, oh no, here it comes. He grabs that gavel, and he raises that gavel, and all of a sudden, through a high window, it was an overcast, cloudy day. The clouds break, and a ray of light shoots through the high window and lands on the judge's head. The gavel is in his hand. He's about to rule adversely. But he puts it down, and he looks at my opponent's counsel, and he says, but what if your client's using my court to steal these innocent people's patents? He repeated the prayer word for word. He said, no. He said, I am staying this action until y'all go to New York City and find out who's right and who's wrong, who's good and who's bad. Slam the gavel, it stayed. My wife starts crying. Both my attorneys start teary eyes. I'm trying to be the macho guy. I wanted to cry so bad, but I wanted it with joy. But I wanted to be they didn't know. He repeated my prayer. I hold it in. We get outside that court. It's busy sidewalks. It's Rodney Square. Busy, busy. So I said, look, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. I'll meet you at the lawyer's office. Man, I didn't have to smoke. It was like a volcano. I burst out with the tears, the most joyful tears I've ever had in my life. It was so powerful I couldn't stand up. I had to go down on one knee. So I'm on one knee. I had a blue suit, a white shirt, and a yellow tie. Yellow's my favorite color. And I got this hand on my leg, and I got this hand. I'm convulsing, shaking so hard because I've never wept like that in my life. When I say weep, my body was just shaking. Well, the people on the sidewalk see this. And they said, one of them says, call the ambulance. He's having a seizure. Well, I go into another world. It wasn't, I'm not on the sidewalk. I don't have any, I'll lose all perception of what's around me. It was more powerful when the Blessed Mother appeared to me. I thought it was Jesus. That's how powerful it was. And it was like heaven. It was like, if that's what heaven is, we all got to get there. I don't know. I don't have any sense of time. I don't know where I am. Feels great. It was ecstasy. I come out of it when I hear the siren of the ambulance. And when I first take my hand off my eyes and I look with my wretched face full of tears, a woman sees me that was trying to help. She says, mister, it's God, isn't it? And I go, yeah. She says, tell the ambulance they can go. She took me in the office building, got wet towels and cleaned my face up and settled me down so I could walk back to the lawyer's office. And then tell my wife, my attorneys, that the judge, that the sunlight, when the clouds opened, the rays of light hit him on the head, and he repeated my prayer. My wife says, let's go celebrate. We're an hour and a half from New York City. Go see a Broadway show, go eat at a great restaurant. I said, I'd rather go to Grand Isle. So we went to Grand Isle, spent a week on Grand Isle. Come home, turning the key on the door and the phone's ringing. Probably 2 weeks later. a week to 2 weeks. Answer the phone. Mr. Saia, yeah. I'm Father Paul Bajeron. Do you remember meeting me? I said, yeah, I met you one time. Your friend's actually cousin of Rock Morales. And Rock introduced you to me when y'all visited at my hunting camp. He said, yeah, that's me. He said, I've been trying to get you. I said, well, Father, I've been gone out of town for several weeks. He said, I had an experience, a spiritual dream when my mother died. I was in horrible grief. Wasn't eating. Just couldn't get out of it. Terrible grief. And I had a technicolor dream when my mother came to me and said, Paul, don't grieve. Be happy for me. I'm with Jesus. I'm in Jesus' loving arms. I'm with Jesus. And he said she looked beautiful, dressed beautiful, beautiful smile, happy. He said, I had a dream with you in it. It's only the second one I ever had. I said, oh, you got to tell me. He said, no, I got to tell you in person. I said, come over. I'm getting ready to grill steaks. So he gets to my house. I said, tell me what happened. He said, there's a field by my house. He said, it's like that field. But the sun hadn't come up yet, and it's foggy. But in the fog, I can see a light. And he said, I'm walking to that light. And he said, Lou, the next thing I see is you. I said, me? He said, yeah, you're kneeling down. How am I kneeling, Father? He said, you got one knee on the ground, your arm on the other leg, and you got your hand over your eyes. And he said, you're wearing a blue suit, a white shirt, and a yellow tie. Exactly what I wore, exactly how I knelt on that sidewalk in Delaware. He said, Lou, then the next thing I see is the most glorious thing I've seen in my life. What was it? He said, 9 foot tall, wings 15 feet high, is the Archangel Michael. And he's got his sword out. And as you're kneeling, he's touching you with the tip on your head. I said, oh, wow. I'm thinking to myself, wow, I thought it was Jesus. It was that Michael with the sword. I said, come in here quick, Father. I want to show you a calendar. I want you to tell me when you had the dream. He looked and he looked and he studied and he thought. Points exactly to the day I was kneeling on the sidewalk in Rodney Square in a blue suit, a white shirt, and a yellow tie. The judge was touched by Jesus. The action in Delaware was stayed until we find out who's the good guy and who's the bad guy in New York, which is going to come in my next podcast.
Next episode.
With Rock. Next episode with Rock. And I can't wait to tell y'all.
And I can't wait to hear it.
What happened in New York.
This is good. Thanks, Lou, for coming. Great testimony. We're loving this. And we'll see you again next episode to continue.
Oh, thank you, Rock.
Amen.